Hello dudes and dudettes, welcome back to League Unlock. My name's Eric. Thank you for joining us ahead of the weekend, which means time for a little bit of fantasy action in the LCS day one of week 8. That's right, only 2 weekends left in the regular season, and fantasy this weekend is similar to all the other weeks where the top 3 teams in the standings are the most expensive, and that makes sense because you can't really trust the other 7, but as we look in the top lane, it's just a different ordering of C9, TSM, and Liquid about who's going to be the most expensive on any given week, and more often than not, it's going to be Liquid, especially when they're matching up against Clutch in one of the bottom tier teams in the LCS right now. So every week, you got to beg the question, is it worth spending your money on Liquid, guys? Which Liquid players are the most important to spend money on? Well, it's probably not Impact, so I'd go somewhere else if you're looking in that top lane. Licorice, that's a good matchup against Echo Fox. We've said before it should be a lot of kills going there, but we'll talk about that matchup in the jungle role because there's something interesting going on there. I feel like Broken Blade is not sick, so that's an interesting matchup because he's going against the man that he replaced. I would still big favor on TSM, so Broken Blade is an interesting one. And Viper versus Sunday, I never thought I'd be saying take Viper over Sunday, but I think you do this week because there's no reason to have any faith in 100 Thieves. It's going to be Saligo again in that mid lane, Afro staying in the bottom lane, and even though some days numbers aren't that bad, when you're losing, it's hard to put up a solid KDA, and 100 Thieves are doing a lot of losing lately. When it comes to junglers, that interesting storyline I was talking about is Panda started for Echo Fox Academy on Thursday, which means the kind boy might be returning to the LCS, and really, I think it's a couple weeks too late. They were 4-4, I think, when they subbed him out. They've lost 6 games in a row, so why not bring him back against his former team? And if you're looking to save some money, I wouldn't be completely shocked if there wasn't a little bit of rush magic against Cloud9 where they came up with a big upset. Not saying it's likely to happen, but if you're feeling very bold and want to save some money, throw in Rush in the lineup. It's probably going to be Svenskeren because, again, Blabber was starting for C9 Academy, so that's who Rush will be going up against. A lot of the junglers also, Wiggly also started. We've seen CLG running through a couple of different rosters. It looks like Moon will be starting again because Wiggly started the Academy game. So Rush is someone you could take a crazy flyer on. Otherwise, if you're going pure consistency, probably Xmithy is a guy you can spend the big bucks on because he basically has at least a decent performance in any given week. When it comes to mid laners, this is probably the hardest role to pick in the LCS from any week to week. Sometimes Jensen isn't super involved in a lot of the Liquid games, or there's just not tons of kills in them, so I'm not sure he's worth the hefty price tag that comes along with him. Saligo was actually, he was better than Huhi in their matchup last weekend, so going up against the POB, I'm not so sure about that. Maybe Crown or PoE, whoever you think is favored in that one. I feel like that's almost a toss-up. I know CLG hasn't been looking great lately, and Optic has actually been on the upswing. Crown has been smurfing in a few of these games, so that's probably a safe bet when you're going 9-0-0 on a Corki. I like that matchup against PoE, going against his former squad. I don't know, that's a tough one to go in between those two, but I would be hovering around there when it comes to mid laners, or you know, Bjergsen has been pretty safe the last couple of weeks as well, even though TSM hasn't looked super clean. AD carries, whether or not you want to spend the big money to make them your captain, well, that's up for debate, but Doublelift, he's been getting a lot of kills. He's got the top KDA amongst all AD carries, some of the highest kill share. So if there is someone on Liquid you want to spend some money on, it's going to be Doublelift. I don't know if you can warrant throwing him in as a captain because that's just so much of that 50K you're putting onto one player. Not sure if it's fully worth it. Sneaky is another guy who's been fantastic lately, and Apollo and Hakuo have been very underwhelming in the bottom lane. Wild Turtle versus Bang. I'm still waiting for Bang to actually pop off, but I don't see that 100 Thieves bottom lane doing that whatsoever. Otto had a rough weekend, and I thought we'd be seeing Stixxay, but again, he's playing in the academy for CLG right now, so it looks like Otto will be back again. I would not be too confident picking him against Optic, even though, I mean, Arrow and Big aren't the most dominant bottom lane that you're going to see, so it's a risky one, but Sven is also another safe bet for TSM. TSM as a whole, I think, is a pretty safe bet this weekend, but when I say that, you know they're going to lose and have 0 kills to their name. Supports, everybody's favorite throwaway for cash. Just pick whoever's left available. Save it for your last pick. Do the rest of your team first, and then just look at who's left that is available for you, which is why Core JJ, I feel like, does not actually get picked that often because it's not worth spending 6K on a support. It's rare that they're going to get even double-digit assists in a lot of these games because in the LCS, there's just not that many kills. So I know Afromu is probably the one guy who, even if you have enough, maybe you're questioning it. But, I mean, the bottom 4 of supports on this board all tend to die a lot. We know Ole likes to face check a little bit and engage when his team is not exactly ready. So against TSM, if you can, I would avoid someone like Ole. Even Hakuo or Vulcan maybe going to be a safer bet here if you're doing a throwaway when it comes to support. But as we look at my picks this weekend, it's kind of a throwaway for support. It's a lot of white on this board. We've got Biofrost and Darshan. You might say, how can you have CLG when they have been so questionable? Well, the main reason is because I wanted to fit 4 TSM members, got them as a team against the Guardians, and to squeeze in Liquid on this roster, I'm very confident that they will take down Clutch. So confident that we take them as a team during the captain. Actually, having a team as a captain has worked out pretty decently in the LCS when it's just best of ones. You know, Liquid are pretty methodical when they close out games. They're going to get they love dragons, and they're going to close out with a lot of turrets quickly, maybe even sub 30 minutes. And I've talked about you can really only be confident in the top 3 teams. That's exactly what I'm trying to do here. But you can't really pick someone. You can't fill out your entire roster with all top 3 most expensive guys on a roster, which is why you got to throw in someone like CLG, where I think it's maybe 60-40 that Optic should be favored in that matchup. So there's a chance that CLG could come away with it, and that's why we got Biofrost and Darshan, who are probably 2 of the most consistent guys you can pick on CLG right now, outside of Power of Evil. But with that, the Guardians will probably take down TSM again in an absolute smash. Coming up after the break, it's the LCK and the LPL. They got a barn burner of a DraftKings matchup this weekend on Saturday. It's a beautiful day to be watching League Unlock. My name's Eric Kummel because we've got a little bit of bonus fantasy preview ahead of the weekend. We're doing a little bit of LCK and LPL, and the Saturday games are absolutely insane. It's almost impossible to pick a functioning and good-looking lineup because there are so many stacked salaries at the top of the board when you have TOP and Griffin both playing in some huge, upset potential against some of the bottom tier teams in China and Korea. And when you start with these top laners, the salaries that you're going to have to put out are absolutely insane. Over 9,000 for 369 going up against Rogue Warriors, which is a little harsh. I mean, Rogue Warriors did just take down RNG in 2-0 fashion and kind of completely dismantled them. But TOP have, as of late, looked like the best team in the LPL. Sword, I can never really warrant spending that much money on him because he is just almost completely ignored on Griffin. But you've got to expect Griffin will be coming back with a vengeance after dropping their first series of the split against Gen G. So I do feel a little bit bad for the Afrika Freaks because they are probably going to get absolutely mollywopped this weekend in their matchup. Griffin, not very happy that they won't be going perfect. But a couple of the middle of the tier LPL matchups, that WE versus V5, that's basically a toss-up. That's why they're the closest when it comes to salaries. But if it might actually be worth it spending that much money on 369 just because if you're spending money for the most expensive guys on TOP, it's definitely going to be the top half of the map in XX, 369, or Knight, because they have been the main win conditions for them, and they've been dominating the LPL so far. And when we go to the jungle spots, I just said XX is the guy you want to spend money on, and if you're spending money on Griffin players, Tarzan is probably someone else that you want to cash in on. The Sandbox versus KT matchup is a little bit intriguing to me. Obviously, On Fleek is the most aggressive jungler in the LCK and probably the third best, right behind Tarzan and Khalid so far. But Score, Old Man Score is back and actually has looked good in his last 2 series. They took SKT to 3 games and, you know, they look decent in a couple of those. So I feel like maybe KT, it's well past too late for them to save their season at all, but maybe Score and the gang will rally off a few wins to close out the regular season. That JDG versus Suning, I know Suning is on a huge downfall. They've lost 7 of their last 8, something absurd like that, but they're still only 2 wins behind JDG. And yes, JD has that win against IG, but outside of that, they haven't really beaten any of the best teams, so that might be closer than it looks on paper. Mid laners, I talked about how expensive Knight is. Obviously, Chovy's going to be incredibly expensive. It might be in your best bet to avoid both of those guys just because most people are going to be picking them. Most people are going to be shelling out money for them because they expect them to put up absolutely insane KDAs, and there's a good chance they do just that. But if you do pick them, everyone else is going to have them. So you kind of almost hope that they don't have a fantastic game in their matchups. Doesn't even necessarily need to be an upset. We have seen games where Chovy could finish 0-0 and 5 in a game. So maybe you hope for something like that. I'm telling you to stay away from the Afrika Freaks, though. Even if you think that somehow this is the huge downfall of Griffin and it's the end of the world, they're going to lose the rest of the games in the regular season, you simply don't know who the Afrika Freaks are going to put in that mid lane. We had Sun there, but they have fielded 3 different mid laners already, and UCal hasn't seen the Rift in a long time, so maybe they go with Sun. He got a pentakill. They look best with him, but you have no idea what the Freaks are going to do with that roster. Even when it comes to 80 carries, you think they would just be throwing aiming out there because he's looked pretty good, pretty darn good on the Afrika Freaks, but I'm just not confident that he'll play all 3 games. Not that it'll go to 3, it'll probably go to 2 for Griffin. KT, it's a similar thing. They just played Gango. Who knows if Zenit will be back. They seem to be enjoying him on the roster, but you know, who knows who they're going to throw out there. Viper, even more so than Chovy, sometimes isn't fully involved in a lot of these games for Griffin, so it's kind of a toss-up whether or not you want to spend that money on him. SMLZ is a guy who I thought we would see performing better. Maybe he can get back onto things for their matchup against JDG this weekend. And Rogue Warriors versus TOP. They've also been subbing guys in and out, Rogue Warriors. You saw Zhang Wuji completely destroy Uzi, but some games he's also not playing, and I don't think they're going to perform against TOP. I think that's a clean 2-0 for top, and when it comes to support this weekend, where can you save some money? Because look how dirt cheap the bottom guys here. You're getting sub 4K on a lot of these pickups. Again, Senin, is it going to be him? Is it going to be Jelly? Who are freaking going to throw out there? Are we going to see Spirit back in the bottom lane? Well, I sure hope we don't see that. But I think someone like Snowflower or Sword Art, I think Sword Art is the main guy you save money on here this weekend, and you hope that Suning figure things out. They have dealt with Maple being sick in some of these weeks, but that is no excuse for how bad they've been recently. They've gone to 3 games a lot, and that's why I've actually got faith in them this weekend against JDG. And my picks, 3 of them. 3 Suning members going on this roster, which seems a little bit insane. I am a little bit worried, but boy, it is a tough matchup on Saturday to put anything solid. That's why there's so many different teams represented here. Got SMLZ as my captain, and he's one of the more cheap captains available, and he's still north of 10K. That's just how expensive everyone's going to be. I talked about 369. He's the man to spend money on if you want to on top. Score, I think he gets it back for KT. They might get the upset against Sandbox as long as they play Smeb, Score, and BDD. Maple should play most of their games, and I talked about being confident in Griffin. You got to get them on your roster somehow. I'm throwing them in as my team. There's no chance I see them losing back-to-back series, especially against some of these non-playoff bottom 4 squads in the LCK. I'm expecting them to be mad. I'm expecting them to finish these games in sub 30 minutes for that bonus point for finishing games quickly, and I expect dominance from them. That's why I snuck Viper in there as well. He was basically just the most expensive AD carry that I could fit with the rest of this roster around it, because I did pick Sword Art early because I believe Suning, please don't disappoint. You should still be a decent team. You should be a playoff team. I think they'll end up being better than JDG when 2019 plays out.